right. So with that, I think we're going to get things started. I would like to welcome all of you. This is a very exciting day and a very fun topic. So we are excited to invite everyone here. Today, we're going to be talking about brave new work and thriving in the age of AI. Uh, Sounds like it's a daunting topic, but I promise you that it will be light and fun and engaging. So, for those of you who are new and fresh to our community, at Aetheon, we actually believe in sparking human potential. And so we're building a future where everyone can thrive. And through all of this future-focused learning, science-backed development, and smart technology, we're going to help you all unlock the skills, the readiness, the passion, the potential of what you need to grow. And so thank you for jumping in and starting that journey with us here on this interesting topic. So while we're getting you all here and started, I would love to ask each of you to maybe share what is your biggest question about AI? And we'll try to get through a lot of those as you put those into the chat. But if you could just say, what is the biggest thing that you're thinking about or challenged by on AI? And, I got to say, I am not a tech person at all. And as my team will attest, I don't understand a lot of it, but I am jumping all in to learn as much as I can. And so I've been having the pleasure of working with Tal, who I'm going to introduce in just a second, but he has got me started on creating my own chat GPT. I've built one for the work of flourishing, and so I'm really excited about how it's helping me. And I hope he can share a little bit more about that as we go along. So with that, without further ado, I would love to introduce everyone to Tal GOLDHAMMER. He is our program director for our forthcoming AI Academy here at Aetheon. And he's the former chief learning officer for Ernst& Young. And he helps individuals, you and me, and organizations figure out how to use AI in a very human-centered way. And, you don't have to have any kind of a tech background to get started on that. So with that, I would love to stop sharing my screen and ask Tal to come on and join us here as we launch this very exciting program. So
Marie,
Tal.
it's great to be here. I'm not able to turn on my video because it's disabled by the host. So if you I don't know if you want to make me a co-host, but I know it was working a moment ago. But
Yeah, okay, let me get into that. That's funny.
as as you do that, perhaps you'll hear my voice for a few moments, and then you'll get to
Yes,
see me.
please.
First of all, Marie, I think what you said. I'm not a tech person. I think that needs to become a thing of the past, and I know you're working on that because all of us are now becoming tech people, and it's a fact of the way we're living our lives, and there's some people think that's great, and some people think that's not as great. I have young kids, and I question that at times also. But the fact is that the technology is moving. It continues to go, and it continues to get more embedded into all the different parts of our lives, including the topic du jour, AI, which we'll get into here. And you've been such a great supporter in thinking about how do we help people flourish with AI rather than feel like they're defeated by it or being being overcome by it. And I think that is the approach to take. I think it's when you accept it as something that can help you be significantly better, significantly more powerful in the work that you do and the impact that you like to have, you take a different lens with AI. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. As you work on that, maybe we'll get started, and I'll start with a question that I get often, which is around: is it going to help humanity or is it going to hurt humanity? We'll start big picture. We don't have to spend a lot of time on this, but big picture: is it going to help or hurt humanity? I think I think it has the potential to do both. Is probably the shortest answer. I think it has the potential to do harm. unfortunately, the cat's out of the bag. And so that AI, the technology is out there, the hardware is out there, the ability for people to leverage it is out there. However, there isn't much regulation, and there's probably a bit of a runway before there is significant regulation. I think for those of you who are connecting from Europe, the EU AI Act, which is slowly coming into effect over the next year or so, I think through August 2026, there'll be some regulation. But even then, it's really focusing on sort of the highest consequence type impact of AI. There are some states in the US that have started to pursue some regulation. There's some federal guidance that is included in the Trump administration's new bill that they're working on around who can and can't enact laws around AI. So I think for now, there is not much regulation, let's put it there. And I'm not sure what regulation will do because both good actors and bad actors have access to AI now. It is not difficult to get access to AI and code and technology, the hardware, the software. And we know from data breaches and cybersecurity breaches, there are plenty of people who are um, breach access to data. When you take AI, which are the algorithms, you take the data, you put it together, and you can do great good and you could do great harm. On the good side, just to think for a moment on the good side, there are now, I think there's at least one, from recollection, there's at least one medication, I think it's for lupus, that has been cleared for actual sale. And it's medication that was discovered by, if you can call it discovered by, formulated by AI. There's another 15, 20 that are either in clinical trials or about to approach clinical trials. So there are lots of good things that can happen from AI, both medical, food scarcity, electricity distribution. But again, there's also some dystopian type things, and I tend to be on the side of abundance and focusing on the great stuff that it could bring to us. I think when we talk about AI, I'm just curious, Maria, any progress on the video there yet, or
I think I fixed it,
yeah,
but I'm
I'm
still
not
not
hearing you,
working.
but if maybe make me a co-host if you go in.
Yeah,
I don't know
sorry
if
about
that's
that. Yeah.
something that we can do because if I'm a all right, now I'm a co-host. Let's see if I could turn my video on. Yeah, look I think it's going. There it goes. Here I am.
Oh,
All right, now
yeah,
I
we're
can't hear you,
official.
Maria. I don't know if that was that might be on my end now. Okay, what happened here? Let's try this again. Go ahead. Go ahead, try say something.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Okay, I don't know what happened there, but through this whole thing, the hopefully you can hear me. I can
Yes,
now
we
hear
heard
you. I
you.
think
Yes, yeah,
I think we're in good shape. So,
yeah,
um,
yeah.
well, anyway, so I thought we'd open up with just sharing a little bit of that, and I think Marie,
Thank you.
you and I were going to have a conversation
Yes,
and explore this brave new
yes.
world and how we can all thrive in this world of AI.
See, I
So,
already prefaced it with saying I'm not a technical person, so there you go. That I just proved it. So,
well, but we're all good, and we're all here together. That's the thing is like humanity, like keeps us human is the way we also comfort each other when things go
yes,
wrong.
that's right. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, but let's get started. So when people hear about this AI in the news and it's everywhere,
Yeah,
sometimes we're met with like this sense of excitement, like, oh my
yeah,
gosh, that's exciting. That's
yeah,
so different. Cool.
yeah,
And then a lot of us are very scared. A
yeah,
lot
no,
of us are very apprehensive. So
yeah.
will it help us, hurt us? Is there a better way to start thinking about all of this?
Yeah, I mean, like, but the way to address fears, like anything in life, is to understand it better. I think we tend
Mm,
to fear and resist the things we don't understand well. That's not always true, but that is, as a general statement, that is true. And so, I think the key, what I believe is the key to AI is understanding it. First of all, it's not going away, right? It's not going away. It's
mm,
here, so it's going to be part of our lives, lots of different parts of our lives, and we could talk about all the different ways it's going to thread itself through our lives. But understanding it better because it is here, it is big, it will change the way we live, the way we work, the way we think, the way we communicate. So I would encourage anyone who feels a little bit of fear or is scared of AI to pause, take a deep breath, and then dive in and try to understand it even just a little bit. I think that will minimize that feeling that some of us have. Now, you asked the question about, is there a better way for us to think about AI and think about it? And I think that this is a mistake that there is a mistake. As you know, Marie, and I lead workshops all over the world with lots of different people. I do it with senior business executives. I do it in higher ed. I do it with students at universities. There is something that I'm finding that is sort of the fundamental thing that everyone's missing with AI, and it's wild, and it's embedded in the name. But we often use the acronym AI, but what's embedded in the name is artificial intelligence.
Mm,
Intelligence. That's the way to think about it. You asked about what is there a better way to think about it? Think about it
mhm,
as intelligence. The mistake that I see everybody making at all levels and all ages is they treat it as software. They treat it as a
mm,
tool. And when we think about software, I mean, think about any piece of software that we've ever bought or implemented or used. It's 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 deterministic, right? It has you put something in and you know what's going to come out. You click a menu, you know what's going to happen when you click that menu. Um, Deterministic, very clear as to how the software is supposed to work. Yeah, AI is probabilistic. Probabilistic
mm,
means that it uses probability, uses statistics to generate the output, especially generative AI, I should say, it uses probabilities and weightings and statistics to generate outputs. First of all, that's very unsettling to us. We can't, it's hard for us to get our head around it. But we should think about it as intelligence, not software. And when you think about it as intelligence, not software, you stop asking the question, what does it do? Right? Software, you say, like, what does that software do? And you start asking the question, how can it help me? Because 99% of the time, I'll say 99% of the time, when you have a task, when you have a challenge, when you have a decision to make, when you have something you want to think through, don't ask the question, what does it do? Ask the question, how can it help me? And more often than not, we can all find ways where AI can actually help us.
mm. Yeah, no, that's super helpful because I think that, you know, often I use it as like a prompt, like to help me maybe reframe or think about something. And so I don't use it as like the actual thing. I use it as like guide me to this.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, like that. First of all, it can guide us. That's the other thing is you can ask AI to help you guide you. So, or it could just help you move forward on something, right?
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
So, for someone who's only dabbled in AI or maybe not even engaged with it at all, how do you recommend getting started with it? Where do you go? Like, there's things out there that are free and there's things that you have to pay for, but where do you start?
Yeah, well, I think you gave me the parameter of somebody who's not really used it or dabbled with it, right? So most likely you haven't signed up or paid for any of the subscriptions, and that's
Right.
totally fine because the free versions of all of the big AI platforms, whether it's ChatGPT, Claude, Grok, Gemini, Llama for Meta. I mean, there's a lot of these platforms. There are free versions of all of these. I think for the most part, there's free versions of all these things. And yeah, if you pay more, you get some additional functionality or you get additional amount of attempts or tries or rounds through it. But start with, first of all, don't feel like you have to pay for anything. If you feel like you're just getting started, start with any of the free versions. Do set up an account. But when you set something up, then the question is like, all right, where do I start now? Like, what do I do? You know, there's a window there. It looks like a Google, search bar window kind of thing. You say, like, where do I start? First, keep in mind, think of it as intelligence. Think of it as something that can help us think. And the expression that we like to use in our workshops are think of it like a second external brain. I mean, literally think of it as if you have a second external brain. It and that's sort of interesting because then you could might picture like an actual brain on a thing. I don't want you to do that, but if you do conceptually think of it as a second external brain, you start realizing, all right, what would I do with this second external brain, with this external brain? Maybe a more accessible version of that analogy is, which I like to use, is imagine you had an intern, and that intern has read the internet, and then not only has that intern read the internet, that intern has memorized the internet. And then you go like, okay, not only has that intern read the internet, memorized the internet, but that intern is able to make connections far beyond what a human could actually do. I mean, like make connections to things like that, you couldn't even imagine. Now, imagine you don't just have one of those interns, but you have a room full of those interns sitting around you at any given point in time while you're sitting at your computer or you're, with your phone. You literally have a room full of these interns, which are these second external brains. At least now they're in a body, right? They're not just a brain on a shelf or on a desk. But you have this room full of interns who are really interested in helping you. And so you'd say to yourself, okay, how do I help these interns help me, or how do I have these interns help me? And you start realizing that they need context. They need to be directed. Just like if you had an intern in real life, you wouldn't
Mhm.
just say to the intern, "Hey, intern, uh, go do work, go do stuff," right? Or like you put in a three-word. You would actually talk to that intern and say, "Okay, here's the thing that we're working on. Here's the context. Here's what we need you to do." Don't treat it like a search engine. Give it a lot of context. Give it a lot of direction. And then start small, right? So you said like somebody who's just dabbled in it, right? You can start small. You can ask questions like, how could you help me with this task? One of my favorite prompts that I love to do, like it's really one of my favorite prompts, and I hope all of you who are watching this or will take this from me. Um, I will actually say, interview me one question at a time so that we can figure out how you can help me on this. And
Mhm.
like I'll describe something roughly and I'll say, interview me one question at a time. I find by the way, just like separately, if you ever have somebody come and ask you a question and you start explaining something and you're like, oh, I got it. Like, you have a realization while you're explaining something. When somebody's asking you questions, you have all sorts of, it forces clarity, right?
Yeah.
So I often ask AI to interview me one question at a time for you to help me figure out how you can help me. Um, and so I don't know, the best way to, and I'll just wrap up here, Marie, which is the best way to learn how to use it and get comfortable with it is just to play with it. It's like riding a
Mhm.
bike, right? It's awkward at first, right? And then after a bit of practice, you sort of get a sense for it, and then it becomes a very powerful tool that helps you get further places that are further. It helps you get places faster, and I think that's the way we should all be thinking about AI, because anyone can get value out of AI if you just put some effort into it and put some thoughtful effort energy towards thinking about it.
So I'm super curious, since you were referencing the intern, which I love, I think that's really cool.
Mhm.
And because we're very focused on good human behavior, is it important to be polite and nice to your chats and to for your prompts? I mean, do you get better or different outputs if you're friendly and kind?
Yeah, I mean, there are varying schools of thoughts, and there are actually studies on this. So, some thoughts. Many people do it because that's just the way they naturally talk to people and type. And I think that's a good thing because by doing so, when you are polite and say, "Please, can you help me with doing blah blah blah," right, rather than just do this, it will work just fine if you give it commands. Um, but when you use those nice words of please and thank you and can you help me or would you help me with, um, it's sort of an unconscious reminder to yourself, or at least it's unconsciously just maybe an unconscious reminder that you should be talking to it like a person and giving it context like you would that intern. Um, I don't think there is a lot of science that shows that when you're nice to it and kind to it, um, that it gives you any better response. In fact, there is some research, at least it was about a year ago, there was some research that shows when you're commanding to it, and like really strict and aggressive with it, it actually will give you a better response. So if you actually say, and I'm not encouraging this, I'm just saying like there's some studies on this, but there was some research out there which showed that when you say like you better get this right because my job depends on it, and now do this, it'll actually work harder. And AI does work in different levels of strength, and that's an interesting thing. But like it'll work a little bit harder, meaning it'll do a few more rounds of thinking before it returns your answer. Um, that's become less and less true with the newer models because the newer models have these chain of thoughts and reasoning mechanisms in them, which are sending your requests and the answers through multiple times. and or at least breaking down
Mm.
the question, and it's evaluating each part of your question very thoughtfully, which is why sometimes when you use certain models, it'll say thinking, it might
Yeah.
take 5, 10 seconds,
Yeah.
or it'll say analyzing. So I'm not sure that you need to be rude to it. I'm not sure that you need to be kind to it, but there is something about being kind to it, which reminds us that we should be talking to it like a colleague or an employee and giving that person enough information so that AI can actually do the job that you want it to do.
Nice. That's super interesting. And I had been hearing about different research on that, so I appreciate your point of view.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, I had this conversation with my daughter the other night. Do you think creativity is still uniquely a
Mm,
human trait?
mm.
And how can AI possibly be creative? Because isn't that ours?
It's a good question. This is a dicey one, and look, I have artists and others in my family and in my circle of friends that I will have these conversations with, and I think depending on who you're talking to, you get different receptions. So let's just stick to some like facts, like So whether well, let's deal with the theoretical part of your question first, or the philosophical, which is like, is creativity, should it stay a human thing only, or can we share it? Um, let's just say if for those of us who've been keeping an eye on some of the developments with Google's VO3, which recently came out, and some of the other platforms in generating video and music and sounds and voices and all sorts of things. um, AI has gotten very, very good at becoming creative. Now, some of those things are obviously based on human prompts, but the human prompts are usually pretty sparse, and it comes up with some things that are really, really creative. I don't know the philosophical answer, the answer to the philosophical question of like what should stay human. I think over the years, technology has come out, and humans who previously did something that was creative have evolved. I mean, 100 years ago, we would take our families to photographers to get a family portrait. Like, we don't need
Mhm.
that anymore. We take selfies, and I'm not saying that they're nearly as good, but actually, like, if you give somebody else the camera and you situate your family in decent enough lighting, you get a pretty nice family portrait. Although you don't get maybe that creative eye that somebody who is looking at the framing of the picture
Yeah.
might identify. But if we go now to sort of like the very technical, maybe I'll share a story which goes back now a bunch of years. So it's like in AI terms, it's ancient times. It's a story from 2016. It's the story of a company called DeepMind, which is now owned by Alphabet, Google, and there's a Chinese game called Go. It's
Mhm.
a thousands of years old. It's if checkers is like a few hundred moves, chess is a few million moves. Go has something like 10 to the 170th power times 2.1, I think is the actually number of moves, meaning it's like more than the atoms in the universe. Like, we're talking a very complicated set of potential moves that can be done. And I'm telling you this story, and many people have heard this story, but I think many people have missed like the headline from this story, or the headlines from this story. So let me just briefly tell it, which is uh, DeepMind, which is, I mentioned, now owned by Google, had created this thing called AlphaGo, and they set up a match or set of matches between AlphaGo and one of the world's leading Go players, a guy named Lee Sedol. And this was 2016. So this is 9 years ago, give or take, right? And for those of us who remember, like, Big Blue and Gary Kasparov
Mm.
and Watson on Jeopardy, like, where this story ends. AlphaGo beat Lee Sedol in the game of Go. And that's interesting, but that's not why I'm telling you this story. Why I'm telling you this story is because the way they designed AlphaGo was they trained it on the rules of Go. They trained it on a whole bunch of historical games of Go so that AlphaGo understood how to play the game. And then they let it go. And they basically configured it so that it favored winning by 1.5 points with 99% confidence. I'll just say that again. They configured it to favor winning by 1.5 points with 99% confidence. And like, Marie, when you and I play a game, if we were playing, chess, or we were playing basketball, or we were playing whatever we're playing, like, if we're winning, we continue playing. We continue to play to win because we want to win more points. But when you only have to win by 1.5 points with 99% confidence, you play the game very, very differently. And that's exactly what AlphaGo did.
Mm.
AlphaGo wound up figuring out moves that, and this is the other second thing that was super interesting about this, is that the creators of AlphaGo said that when they analyzed the moves, they said humans could have played this game for thousands more years, and they still wouldn't have come up with moves as creative as AlphaGo did. And that's because the power of AI and these neural networks to actually think hundreds, thousands of steps ahead, um, and come up with creativity. In that case, it was creativity in terms of how to play the game of Go, but to come up with creative solutions that humans just don't have the capability of doing. So when people talk about, is AI capable of being creative? I think the answer is yes. When we get back to the philosophical question of like, where should we draw the line? I don't have an answer to that, but I think we as humans are going to figure that out. But AI is very creative.
Yeah. Wow, that's fascinating. And yeah, lots of ways to consider that. And, I'm just thinking through the creativity of humans and what we can access from materials and tools and things. And,
Yeah.
wait until robots get that.
Well, I mean, we're on the cusp of that. I mean, there are lots of companies right now that are. Oh, are you talking about the paperclip maximizer? Is that where you're?
Yeah, I
So
saw
yeah.
that. Yeah.
What
Yeah.
Marie? Well, Marie is, for those of us who don't know, there's a guy named Nick Bostrom who's a philosopher. He wrote something like 25 years ago. He wrote a paper or an article called the paperclip maximizer, which is what happens when AI is given access to, well, is given instructions to maximize the use of paperclips, and maximize the production of paper clips rather,
Perfection. Mhm.
and production of paper clips, and it runs out of materials, but it's programmed to maximize the production of paper clips, and so it starts getting access to the banking system and trading stocks to make more money, to buy more supplies, to buy more machines, and then it gets very dystopian of like what happens when it realizes the only thing it could stop it from achieving its goal, which is maximizing the production of paper clips, are the humans who could turn off the machines. Starts taking care of the humans. So we won't go there. That's back to some philosophical stuff. But like these are things that we as humanity need to be thinking about, and guide
Yeah.
rails and controls, while we think about all the amazing things that AI can be doing.
Yeah. And I appreciate everyone adding questions and comments in the chat. We will be getting to those in just a second, but I have a couple more questions for
Yeah.
Tal, and then I'm going to set him free on some fun demo kind of stuff. But,
Yep.
when we think about, this conversation we were just having where humans end and AI begin, let's talk about the roles. What are the roles that we should be playing, and what are the expectations for that?
Yeah, there's a phrase that gets repeated often, which is make sure there's a human in the loop.
Mm,
That's sort of phrase, or humans in loop, and the idea meaning that when we're using AI, if we think about sort of the workflow or the cycle of using AI, there should always be a human in the loop. In some cases, it's to check the output of AI before we use it for something consequential, or it's to make sure that we're giving it the right parameters. There's a different phrase that I prefer, and the phrase that I prefer is human in the lead. It sort
mm,
of means the same thing at the end of the day, but I think it's important for us to all have a reminder that when we're using AI, we shouldn't blindly rely on the output of AI. And I share this assuming that, for the purpose of this conversation, when we're talking about AI, we're talking about things like Gemini or Grok or ChatGPT or Claude or these kinds of things that we all have access to that we're using for general purposes. If you are a doctor, there are AI platforms that are fine-tuned and configured for doctors, and you could place significantly more reliance on the output. If you're a lawyer, there are specific platforms that are designed for lawyers that use AI, but they're designed for lawyers to help you do all sorts of things. If we are using any of the widely available ones, the ones that we were just mentioning here, um, then we want to make sure that if the output is consequential, like you're going to send a customer a message, or a vendor a message, or your boss a message, or your entire company a message, based on something that comes out of one of those platforms, always have a human, not just in the loop, but in the lead, meaning take responsibility. You are in the lead, which is why I like that little nuance difference of human in the lead versus you and human in the loop. From my own personal workflow perspective, Marie, and I think everyone differs in this, but I'm probably a slightly more advanced user of AI, not because not because I've done AI coding or I've done built AI platforms, because I just use it a lot. I try to use it a lot. So I can, in that regard, I'm maybe a little bit more advanced. I recently, not too long ago, had evaluated where I spend my time or how I partner with AI. I actually asked ChatGPT, by the way, I said, like, if you had to think about the different categories of ways that we work together, what percentage do you think I'm bringing to the table on a particular task versus you? And it actually gave me a pretty, I asked it to give it a, asked it to create a chart for me, and it created a chart for me. Generally speaking, roughly speaking, depending, overall, about 10%, I'd say AI does about 80% of the work, right? That's sort of in the middle. There's about 10% at the beginning, which is me giving it the goals and the context and defining the limits and explaining what I want it to do. There's AI that does 80%. And then I spend another 10% on the back end reviewing, iterating, and validating. Again, that is me being the human in the lead, um, AI doing the bulk of the work in the middle. That's a way to think about it. Now, everyone's going to have different ratios based on how you use it and what you use it for. And certainly, I should
Mhm.
also mention, Marie, because I know many of us work for different types of companies. Like I'm suggesting things that, of course, are general in nature, but always understand what your company's policies are. Always abide by
Yeah.
those rules and policies. We never want to tell you to do something that was contrary to what your organization, especially if you're doing it with company or work related content on a work related system. So be smart about it is maybe the rule here. We're all,
Hmm.
smart about it.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's good advice. And I
Yeah.
appreciate the bookend approach of how you use it. And I think that's you've taught me well, so I do that too. So thank you. There are several coaches on this platform and this call right now, and I'm curious, what about this idea of giving AI a personality? And we're hearing a lot of stories about how people are getting too attached to their personas that they're creating or thinking about. So maybe talk a little bit about that, and then we'll get into some demos.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's a term called anthropomorphizing. Uh,
Yeah.
Easy for me to say, I know. I have to slow myself down when I say it. Where you actually give it a persona, or you believe it's like a person. And of course, AI is not a person yet, I guess. But as of today, uh, while we're talking here, it's not a person. But thinking of going back to the original part of the conversation that we were having, Marie, when you think of it as intelligence, or you think of it as this room full of interns that are there to help you and they've read the internet, giving it clarity in terms of the prompt that you're giving it, it's about giving it enough context. Many people treat AI when you're putting in a prompt almost like you do with Google. And I looked it up. The average number of words that people put in when they are using Google is like 3.4, meaning like
Mm,
less than 4 words. That's not nearly enough context when you're using AI. We recommend usually 50 words, 100 words, 200 words, or using voice, because you
mhm,
tend to ramble a little bit more when you're using voice. And that's okay because AI loves context. The more context you give it, the more it understands. And so giving it a persona is not a bad thing. I think there's people who take it, extreme level, and I'm not judging them. But that's not what we're talking about here. But give it a persona like, you are a skeptic. You are a strategist. You are my boss. You are literally my boss, Marie Gill, right? Like you can literally give it that, and it will go out to the internet, find information about Marie in terms of the way it is responding to you. So you could be my customer, you could be my investor, act as my guide, act as my coach. You can do a lot of these kinds of things with AI. So giving it a persona actually helps it understand the context of what you want and need. Just like if you pulled over an intern and said, "Hey, come here, intern. I want you to act as a customer that's going to be, not going to be happy with this change that we're about to make." And like
mm.
that intern, if you give it enough context, maybe we'll do okay. AI will do great in those kinds of scenarios.
Yeah, that's awesome. So there's a couple of questions that are kind of bubbling up in the chat, and they
Yeah.
relate to how we're thinking about this next portion of this. But for a handful of people, we're looking for jobs, we're looking for career changes, we're looking at upping our game so that we can do more, better. Let's talk about the tools that you're using and think about, and then maybe give us a couple of demos on how to think about that resume or the way to think about optimizing how we tell our stories.
Yeah, I mean the tool in my toolbox that I use the most is ChatGPT. That's just the one that I began using earliest, and that's the one I'm most comfortable with. Claude is another really good one. Gemini is very good. I use Gemini. I subscribe to a lot of these things. I pay. Perplexity is one that I use for searching the internet. I found myself using Google less and Perplexity more in terms of searching. And so it depends on, I now use ChatGPT also for image generation. I found that it's quite good at, if you're using 4.0, the 4.0 model in ChatGPT, to creating images, really good. So those are the sort of my go-to tools. I have a lot of others that I use. I use Midjourney, and I use some for creating little video clips or creating sounds and music, voice cloning. I use 11 Labs. There's long lists of these things, and there's many of these platforms. Um, so I don't necessarily advocate for one over the other. Use the one that you're most comfortable with. But I use ChatGPT the most. And if we want, we'll jump into some demos because I know we did want to talk a little bit about career change. So I'm going to just, if you give me a moment here, I'll share my screen. Hopefully, just confirm that you could see my screen there. Is that coming up?
We can.
All right. Well, I thought we would spend, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes or so as we sort of pull this conversation together. Think about, all right, well, what happens if we're looking for a new job or we're interested in a career change and we're not sure? So I've drafted some prompts that I have here on my side here. I'll drag them in, you'll see them. But that's, I thought we'd save a little bit of time. I pre-populated or pre-written some prompts. So what I have here also is that Marie, you and your team had shared with me some LinkedIn profiles. This is a particular LinkedIn profile that from somebody, and I said, here's a prompt that I wrote, which was, here's my LinkedIn profile. Based on what you see, what strengths, themes, and career patterns stand out? What kinds of roles or environments might I thrive in? Even ones I might not have considered. By the way, those are the kinds of questions that I love to ask ChatGPT, which is give me some obvious and give me some non-obvious ideas. And here you see it's evaluating my key strengths, my career themes and patterns, roles, environments where you might thrive. And now it's going through. And by the way, you can ask it for further details. You can always ask it to go deeper on any of these things. But look, head of future of work or chief learning architect or public sector transformation, fractional CPO or L&D venture partner, ESG or purpose driven. And so here's another follow-up prompt. Act like a thoughtful career coach. I'm trying to figure out my next step professionally, but I'm feeling stuck. Ask me one question at a time to help me clarify what I really want and what might be holding me back. So I mentioned this earlier, interview me one question at a time. And here goes. When you think about moments in your career when you felt the most energized, fulfilled, what were you doing, who you're doing with, and what about those experiences made them stand out to you? Now, in the interest of time, I'm not going to answer these questions as we go through them, but you will have a thoughtful conversation with AI, and it will ask you some very interesting uh, um, uh, interesting questions. Um, here's um, here's another one, which is well, here's one where I asked it to. I think let's see if it'll go out to the internet for each of the suggested career paths above. So it gave me these environments. Those aren't really career paths, but you get the idea. Can you tell me which ones are growing fastest and what kinds of companies are hiring? Like now it's going out and searching the web.
Mm,
And it's still giving me like, here we go, head of future of work and chief learning architect. It's for each of these things, it's giving me ideas. Now, again, I'm asking very general questions just for purposes of
yeah.
these types of things. But here, growth rate, future of work lead, growth rate very high with a little rocket ship there, right? And okay, I think these are the sources that it pulled through, or some of the sources, right? Here's one that I love, and this is um, here is help me rewrite things, right? So I had dragged in a LinkedIn profile, a sample LinkedIn profile, but here's a prompt. Here's a plain description of something I did in a past job. So it was written as, and I put in quotes, helped organize and update internal training documents for new hires. So I said, rewrite it as a strong, results-driven bullet point for resume, highlighting action, impact, and metrics where possible.
That's
So
good.
here's a stronger version. So um, streamlined and updated onboarding materials for new hires, improving training clarity and reducing ramp up time by 25%. See, it made up some metrics in there. Obviously, you
Yeah.
put your actual numbers in there. Collaborated with cross-functional teams to ensure accuracy and alignment with current processes. And then you could also, this gives you another, and it asks, do you want stylistic variations? More concise, more formal, more creative.
See, and
Maria,
I
is
find
this?
it very helpful because, so often you just need something to trigger in your own brain, and then you can go, oh, well, I can do that and this and that and make it, add it, make it
Yeah.
your own.
Yeah. So here goes. Here's some more creative versions. That's right. I find myself doing that with AI all the time, which is
Hmm.
just interacting with it. And like in 100% of the time, it winds up taking me a little bit longer because I'm investing the time. But also in 100% of the cases, I find myself having these realizations, having these moments where it's bringing up ideas and triggering things, both because it asks me questions, because I ask it to ask me questions, and I have these realizations, and also because it thinks of things like AlphaGo makes connections to things that I would have never have thought about
Right,
on my own. Yeah.
right.
Should we move on? I can give you some other things here, which is like here's another one. I love this. I forget. Let's see what's one of the jobs that we might want to take on here. Well, it's a head of future of work, right? Or workforce innovation, head of workforce innovation. So let's see, based on my updated bio, or based on my bio, write a professional summary that fits someone applying to the head of workplace innovation sorry for my typing, and it emphasizes adaptability. In other words, like I want it to be to show if I know that the person who's hiring is focused on people who are on adaptability, it'll write a professional summary here. Again, human in the lead. If this doesn't sound like you and doesn't represent you, don't use it just because AI generated. However, it should give you a uh, uh, really good draft to work from. And you can see here, it says, would you like a shorter version for the top of a resume or slightly more narrative version for a cover letter? So let's say, write a cover letter. You can have it write a cover letter, right?
Hmm.
Um, I also like doing this in demos sometimes, which is, so here it's writing the cover letter, right? So here's like, write a version of the professional summary that reflects my personality, which is quirky and fun. Make sure it's still professional, but make sure my personality shines through. Now, sometimes what I also do is if you have a sample of your writing that
Hmm.
conveys the quirkiness and fun, I'd say, here's a sample of the way I usually communicate. Can you infuse that? So here's a quirky and fun version of it, which is people whisperer, culture builder, strategic mischief maker, the good kind. I'm a people and cultural leader with 20 years of experience helping organizations from crown agencies to fast moving startups. In other words, it it
Yeah.
it can make these kinds of connections that 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 would take us a while to do. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. That's so fun.
Mhm.
So, one of the questions that just popped up from the audience is from Kevin, and he's received guidance to empower individual contributors to identify aspects of their workload to delegate to AI agents. Can you talk through how best to identify what to delegate, how to train
Mm.
the agent, and how to check the agent's work?
Okay, well, multiple parts of that question.
Yeah,
So,
that's a big one, Kevin.
yeah, I mean, building an agent takes a little bit of effort. It's far more than we're going to actually be able to do here. But I'll touch on a couple things there. The first part of the question is a great question as well, which is, every job is comprised of tasks, right? So, a job might be like you have a role, but your job is comprised of, or people on your team have, jobs that have tasks. And so, um, the way that I find is best is engage with the team, have a conversation with the team. Part of it is making sure that everyone on the team understands the potential for AI, the power of AI, the possibilities, things like we're doing right now. I'm just showing you some small demos, but hopefully that's sparking some use cases of how you might be able to use it. So by educating the team, you then can get into the conversation of, okay, what are the things that each of us are doing that we and I generally like to look at two categories, pain points and opportunities. On the pain point side, which is actually usually a lot easier to find, what are the things we don't like doing? What are the things that would take us the most time? What are the things that we get the most criticism for because we don't do it well enough or whatever it is, pain points, whatever that might be. And then on the flip side, opportunities. If we had the ability to have this room full of interns sitting with us, what are the parts of our jobs, which tasks would we identify that we might be able to engage with AI to do? So that's sort of a very quick, we don't have a lot of time here, so I'm giving you a quick
Mhm.
answer, but that's generally a direction to think about it. The question about agents. So um, there are a whole bunch of very affordable platforms now that allow all of us to build agents. For those of you who don't know what an agent is something that does something proactively on our behalf using AI. So imagine we're not just sitting here putting in prompts. You tell it to go do something and it goes does a whole bunch of stuff for you. Actions, sends emails, reviews emails, makes restaurant reservations, books hotels and flights, whatever it is. One of them that I was looking at the other day has thousands of interfaces, APIs with lots of different platforms to do lots of things. So agents are a thing. They're going to be a much bigger thing in the next 12 months. But maybe the easier thing to talk about, and Marie, you mentioned it earlier on, are custom GPTs.
Mhm.
In many of the platforms, ChatGPT has custom GPTs, Gemini has gems, uh, uh, um, Copilot has what they call them agents, but they're really these same things. Each platform has its own. I think Claude has projects where you can configure your own GPT based on instructions that you have for things that you do repetitively. So, Kevin, you're asking about things that your team can be doing. Most likely, the things that you're probably going to come up with in those tasks are things that get repeated and people do on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. So you can create custom GPTs, which is a custom set of instructions that executes using the GPT model, OpenAI's GPT model, but follows your set of instructions. It's quite easy to do. And I'd say quite easy. It could take you less than 10 minutes to set one up. You could watch a few YouTube videos. It'll explain it. You do need the paid plan on most of the platforms to be able to set these things up. You don't need the paid plan to be able to use them. You just need an account. But that's
That's
hopefully
great.
good enough answer. And thanks for the
Yeah.
question.
Well, and I think this next question is intended to kind of help put a bow on all of this too. Is so I know a couple of us are very curious. What has been your biggest surprise for you personally in the space? But also, as you think about taking on the responsibility of the AI Academy and what you want to deliver for our broad and very global at this point member base and growing, what is it that you would expect to help us learn that you've gone through, and maybe what are you planning to impart with us?
Yeah, well, let me before great questions. Before I do that, I'll just share, Marie, that we've just played around with a couple of prompts here and had it rewrite text. But you can get into actually skill building as well. So imagine if I put in a prompt that said, "Hey, I'm actually applying for this job. I want you to play the part of a hiring manager." We talked about personas, and I want you to ask me challenging questions, and I'm going to give you my answers. And as I give you my answers, I want you to both react to it like give me feedback on it, like how good was my answer, and then react to it like you actually are a hiring manager. What would your next comment be? And you can
That's
actually
cool.
get into this conversation. It's a little quirky when you're doing it or clunky when you're doing it typing because you're not going to, you don't get, but you can actually have voice. So if you have the app, whether it's on your computer or on an iOS device or an Android device, you can actually have conversations with AI so that these conversations are feel more natural and literally practice the way an interview would go or a conversation would go. Or if you need to have a difficult conversation with members of your team, like
Hmm.
describe that individual that you're going to be speaking with The person's going to be defensive. The person's going to is not very detail oriented, and AI can actually play that part. So it can actually help us build skills both for our normal day jobs, or if we're looking to change careers or
Yeah,
explore something different, it can actually do that. So I just wanted to share that with everyone because
that's
that
super cool.
skill building is another important thing that it can actually help with. Your question. So first, what has most surprised me or is surprising to me? Um, it's going to sound so obvious, but it literally is the thing that comes to mind, which is how fast this is all going. Almost 3 years ago, almost well, 2.5, 3 years ago, this really hit everyone's radar with November 2022, I think it was. Yeah, ChatGPT came out, and everyone was concerned on the quality of the prompt, and we had these jobs for hundreds of thousands of dollars for roles like prompt engineers. You don't need to be really good at prompting anymore. You just need to be able to provide enough context. I mean, I've written some
Hmm.
very clunky, miserable prompts, looking prompts with spelling errors and grammatical errors. Just like dump it all in there, and it's gotten very, very good. The models have gotten so big and so sophisticated and so fast. That's probably what surprises me the most. And I think what I think the surprising thing that I'm sort of looking forward to, or the thing that I think is going to be that I'm excited about, and I think will surprise a lot of people, will be both that continued speed and the speed at which agents are going to be taking over um, our work and in our daily flows, whether it's our personal lives or professional lives. So those are things that are surprising to me, and also things that I'm looking forward to. You mentioned, I'll stop sharing my screen here so we can see each other better. The AI Academy that we're creating, I think maybe another thing that surprises me, and I should say this is actually is surprising to me, is how many people I still come across. I mentioned I run programs all over the world with people of all different demographics and seniority. The number of people who really have not engaged with AI at the level that they should. And I'm not talking becoming an expert that you can, do demos like we just did and talk about it. Just like try it, play with it, get a sense from it and use it for a few things, like that bicycle. That, is very surprising to me. And so what we're looking to do with the AI Academy is make it very accessible. I think many programs that I've sat through, workshops, keynotes, classes on AI, we get lost very, very quickly. The presenters assume that we understand all the mechanics of AI, all the terminology, all the history of AI. And I think that's a shame because it doesn't have to be that difficult. The barometer I use, my mother's in her 80s. The barometer I use is if my mother will understand what we're doing and what we're talking about, then we're hitting
Yeah.
it. And so the AI Academy is built and is being designed to help everybody, no matter what level of proficiency, get even better at AI. If it means you're starting at zero and going up to something, it will be helpful for you. If you have using it a lot, there'll be plenty of stuff in there to help you push your thinking and get even better with it.
Yeah, that's super exciting. And I know that we couldn't be any luckier than to have you at the helm because you make it so interesting and I'm drawing upon all the different times I've heard you speak and present this topic. It's very engaging. So thank you for taking us on this journey. I'm curious, as we think about wrapping up, what's the one thing you'd want everyone on this call and watching this video to maybe try
Mm,
today? What does that look like?
the one thing.
The one
Um,
thing.
I could just say try something, right?
Yeah.
But that's a little bit of a cop out. I think if you have a sense, like if this conversation sparked some ideas of where you should go, something you want to work on, go do that thing. That's the one thing. But if you're not sure, I think if there's one thing, sit down with AI and write yourself a long prompt, which is here's who I am, here's my role, here's the kind of work that I do, here's the company I work for, in the industry I work for, in this country, doing this kind of work, serving this kind of customer. I'd like you to interview me one question at a time to find use cases where you can be helpful to me in my
Mm.
job. Like that to me would be like the one thing all of us can do. You know,
Yeah.
convey a whole bunch of context to AI, and then ask AI to interview you to help get more refinement on where and how AI can help you in your lives. By the way, you could do the same thing with your personal life. I went
Yeah.
on a hike a few weeks ago. Up a mountain. I'm not a mountain hiker at all. I asked AI how it could help me. I learned that it can help put together a training plan for me. It can help me figure out what supplies I need based on the weather and the time of the year and all the stuff. So like it could be in your personal life, it could be in your professional life, but describe something and ask it to interview you one question at a time to figure out how it can help you. That's the one thing I'd say everyone can do, and it's very accessible.
All right, that is awesome. Well, thank you for taking the time and thank you for humoring me with the initial clunky
Oh.
startup. I don't know what happened there. We were
So
good to start. But I would encourage everyone on this call to consider inviting friends and colleagues and family members to join Aetheon, to join the community and the campus. It's free. We're trying to build a momentum behind this mission, that we want to help people and that there's a community here to help lift and celebrate skill building and support for one another. Tal's boot camp for the AI Academy comes out in end of the summer. So to get ready for back to school, September 1st, you're going to have a lot of access to Tal and tools and really cool, fun things. You won't want to miss that. So you got to get in, get onto the campus, send all your friends, and we will see you at school. Thank you. Thanks
yeah.
everybody for joining us today, and we'll see you soon.
And Marie, thanks for a great conversation. And again, thanks to all of you for joining us today.
Yeah, very fun. Very fun. Okay. Thank you, everybody.